Hello, fellow lab experts. Welcome to the Rock Diagnostics Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything medical laboratory science in Africa and around the world. Today, we have a very important topic, a very interesting topic. We'll be talking about why it's important to do an internship while you are studying medical laboratory science. It's something that many students forget or neglect or think it's not as important, but once they get into the actual work, they realize it's something they should have done because there's a lot that they missed along the way. We'll talk about this and some other things. I'm your host, Robert Sandlinger, and I'm joined by
Yes, Dennis.
and
Wisdom.
so stick around. Let's talk MedLab. So, like I was saying earlier, we're talking today about the importance of internships in medical laboratory science. Internships, you know what internships are? It's when you, let's say, are done with a particular field or you're studying a particular field and then you actually go and try it by yourself to see what it's like, what the hours of work are like, what the job is like, what it entails, what's figure out what the things you like about it are, what you dislike about it are. It changes from one person to the other. That's why it's important to not just listen to what others tell you about the field. Like we'll tell you lots of different things, but at the end of the day, you have to go and then try it by yourself. So let's talk a bit about that. What memories do you have about your internships?
Should I go first? Okay. So, well, my internship, first thing I'll say about internships is that they give you time to deepen the practical aspect of what you've learned in class. Because most times in class, things are just on a theoretical level. So, an internship gives you time, sometimes 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, to deepen what you've learned.
Yeah.
But besides that, it's done in a work environment. So you are meant to be there at a particular time. You are meant to leave at a particular time. You are meant to watch the heads of the lab or whomever is your supervisor during your internship period. Look at what they are doing, practice
Yeah.
as often as possible. So that's part of why the internship is very important, and it gives you the time also to know, okay, is this an aspect I would love to specialize in: hematology, microbiology, biochemistry.
And what was the most surprising thing that you found out while doing your internship? What surprised you the most? Something you didn't expect and that you found out happened when you did your internship?
Hmm. In my case, I think it had to do with the workflow and the frequency at which samples came. So personally, I thought, okay, and normally at the lab, samples should come around 8, and depending on how things go, it should be done as soon as possible. But as time went on, I realized that that was not the case. Sometimes samples could come around 11, 12 just before break time, and you have to be there because your supervisor isn't going anywhere. So why should you feel you two have to go on a break? So that was a surprise.
All right.
But
And Dennis, you did internships in Benin Republic, but you also did internships in Nigeria. Like when you compare both, what were your, what's what was striking?
Well, one major thing is I think I feel more comfortable doing my internships over there in Nigeria because apart from the fact that they carry you along and they are also always eager to make sure you have the hands-on experience and they ask you loads of questions all the time just to get you up on your feet like every time. So although it's good over here, but I still feel in Nigeria is better.
Okay. And what was the most surprising thing for you? The
For
lab?
me, I think it's the call thing. The way they do their call in Nigeria is here in Benin. I know they do night shifts, they do morning shifts, but I've not really seen them go on calls, like where they stay in the lab for up to 2 days before they eventually go home, and then other people come to replace them. Although they are paying you for your call time, but
Extra hours.
yeah, yes, they pay you for the extra hours, but still much.
Yeah, true. Like 2 whole days at the lab. There was actually sometimes it happens over here. You said it?
I'm surprised they didn't pay it.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
For them to be there,
Yes,
they don't have the pay.
yeah, they have a tea. Majority of them have a tea room where there's a bed, there's TV, just for you to be comfortable.
Yeah, that doesn't sound too bad.
Nothing, no place like home though.
But then I guess if there's a lot of work, then that doesn't help that much
Yeah.
because you'll be standing anyway.
Exactly.
Okay, so internships, they're always important in my opinion because until you see what the job is like, you can't really know what it's about. Because there are always going to be very tiny things, very small things that you may not have been expecting that you're going to find out once you're actually there doing the job. And also, there are some things you may not have been taught in class that you're going to find out when you're actually there doing the job. It may be small things. Maybe, for example, that every morning when you come, the first thing you have to do is clean the whole area where we are going to be working. You may have been told that in class, but it's something that sometimes lecturers may find so basic that they don't spend that much time on it, but it's extremely important, especially in the biomedical laboratory science environment, because it may lead to contamination of the samples, especially if you're doing microbiology, that kind of work. And there are lots of different things of that sort that you may not be able to pick during a lecture. Are there some things of that nature that you saw in your internships?
For instance, another thing I saw that's important was to be able to look at two things at the same time. So, say you're meant to run what do you call that? A clotting time reaction. I look at the stopwatch or at a clock simultaneously. There's that you need a stopwatch or something just to do that. And you might have to find a new technique on how to hold the tube. You might not be used to holding a tube with your left hand if you are right-handed, or you might have to learn that how to swirl, or for instance, pipetting, how to pipette quickly without any bubbles and how to do it effectively. Or say blood collection. Maybe in class you were taught to collect it a certain way, but during internship you find out that I could hold it better, I could do this, I could do that. So that's it on my side.
Yeah. Another thing I also noticed as an intern in Nigeria is for medical lab scientists, they take principles very seriously because they always tell us then that what differentiates you from a technician, from a medical lab technician, is your background in knowing the method, knowing the principle behind it, not just knowing how to run blood sample, how to count blood cells, but knowing why you are doing it, the principle behind it, the method you are using, what's the principle behind that method. That is something they really stressed. They stressed on it a lot for us. They made sure we were conversant with almost all the principles. So those are one of the things I enjoyed during my internship over there. Here they do, but not as much as over there. They always want to make sure there is a difference between you calling yourself a medical lab scientist and the people that are medical lab technicians. They need to be that different. So if you guys are having similar, so why they normally stress that is, medical lab technicians take almost the same thing. So they take like almost similar courses with medical lab scientists. But what differentiates us is that principle, knowing the reason why we are doing each of those tests, each of those procedures.
So in summary, it's like anyone can do what you do.
Exactly.
But how do you differentiate yourself from Just that
Yeah,
everybody-
from everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you always stress
And I agree with that. Principles are extremely important because it's principles that will allow you to do, for example, some troubleshooting.
on it. Yes.
If, let's say, you're doing a test, you're sure that the result was supposed to be positive, but then at the end the result is negative, then either the idea you had was wrong, or you made an error along the way. And knowing the principles behind the technique are going to allow you to go back step by step and figure out where you may have made an error. And then essentially remove or erase the chances you've made an error to know whether it's the actual result you're supposed to get or there was an issue that happened along the way. So principles are extremely important. And back to the point about alarms. Alarms are also extremely important because let's say you have like 3 different tests you're doing at the same time. You may forget while you're busy doing one that those 2 extra ones are happening. And you can't just trust your brain to remind you. Usually you need to have an alarm. So for example, in my case, I remember I used to have a phone back then, a very simple phone that had multiple alarms. So you could set one alarm, a second, and then third, and so on. So it made things a bit easier. And it allowed me to name one particular procedure I was doing and then put the time slot whenever it's time it rings. There was a time when I switched the phone to a Samsung and I almost thought about changing that Samsung because the parameters there was no parameter in the phone itself to allow me to put multiple alarms at the same time. It was just one at a time. And I had to download an extra application in order to use to be able to do multiple alarms at a time. So those are some of the things that you can find out while you're doing an internship because it's going to allow you to determine how to adapt your work ethic and the way you work to the environment in which you find yourself. And even extra, it's also important to try and do internships in multiple places because from one place to the other, there are going to be differences. So it's important to also be able to do that.
Yeah. I wanted to add that it also helps you pay attention to very little details. For instance, on getting to the lab, I didn't know that there were peculiarities with the reagents. There are certain reagents you have to keep between 2 and 8 degrees. There are some you have to keep between 18 to 25 degrees normal room temperature. So if you were not used to that idea, or getting to the lab, you have to be very careful looking at all of these descriptions to know that, okay, this goes to the fridge, this can stay on the workbench or in a dark cupboard, and so on. So, yeah, I guess it ties with the point on principles as well, because if you run an analysis and you discover that, oh, there was a little error, and you have to walk back from the results from where that was made to be able to get back to that place. You need to be someone who pays attention to a lot of details.
Yeah. All right. So, what I hope is that you've been able to get something to this discussion and that you've been able to understand why internships are important. And it's not just in medical laboratory science, as you know, in various different fields. It's important to always do internships to know how the work actually is, because there's a difference between learning in theory in the classroom and then learning in actual practice. And so, any words, last words?
No, I'll just add that most times getting those internships it's quite challenging. Okay, but first try to apply. Try to apply in your first year, in your second. If you don't get it in your first year, wherever you applied, they would have a record of your name. So if you apply in the second year, you might have a higher chance of getting it. So that's because the experience is very unique from what you are taught in class or from what you witness during practicals. I would say during practicals, people try to be nice because you are students and just go. But during the internship, you feel the stress, the mental fatigue, whatever is going to happen to you in the real world, you're
Yeah.
going to understand it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you start
You start
getting to
on
know
yes.
yeah.
what's happening behind the scenes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So most importantly is the hands-on experience that you're going to have if you do the internship. The lab scientists would always make sure you run analysis, you interpret it. All they mostly do is help, they supervise you along the way and help you in interpretation and all of that. But it's really good for hands-on experience because most times students look at what is done in the lab or during their practicals and be like, okay, I should be able to do this. It's not hard. Or you realize as simple as taking blood sample, venipuncture, immediately it's time for you to do that. Your hands will start shaking. Okay? So it's very important you go for internships that gives you hands-on experience. You will lay your hands and be able to do those things yourself.
It's your confidence.
Yeah, and as you do it, as you go on, you realize that your confidence starts growing, and before you know it.
So there you have it, lab experts. You've been given tips. Hope you'll be able to use them and utilize them. If you haven't yet gone for any internship and you're now studying, make sure you go for 1, 2, maybe even 3 if possible. Thanks again for being here with us today and join us next time so we can keep talking MedLab.